I had always been fascinated by the unknown, by the things that go bump in the night. As a child, I would sneak into the basement of my parents' house, try and communicate with the dark shadows that lurked in the corners. Ghost stories were my favorite, and I could never get enough of the legends, the haunted places, and the spirits that could supposedly cross over to the living world. But no matter how hard I tried, nothing ever came of it. I chalked it up to my overactive imagination and went on with my life. That was until I discovered the Fright Forum. It all started one quiet evening in New Orleans, where I had just moved into a small, crumbling apartment on Magazine Street. I was 24, hungry for an adventure, and fresh out of college with a degree in journalism. New Orleans seemed like the perfect place for a young journalist looking to uncover strange and mysterious stories. I spent my nights researching local legends, ghost stories, and the city's haunted past. And that's when I found it, Fright Forum. The site was strange, dark, and unsettling, but I couldn't stop myself from scrolling through its pages. It was a forum where users shared experiences with spiritualists, psychics, and paranormal investigators. But the most intriguing part of the site was the so-called psychic consultations that promised users a chance to communicate with the dead. The reviews were bizarre. Some of them seemed legitimate, and others were filled with chilling accounts of people who claimed to have spoken to their lost loved ones. The testimonials were so convincing, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was something to all of it. The idea of speaking to the dead was too fascinating to resist, so I joined one of the exclusive groups they advertised. A part of me felt a little silly, but another part was intrigued. What if this could be the big story? As an aspiring journalist, this could be my ticket into something bigger. I told myself it was just research, a way to write an article, but deep down, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. When I entered the chat room, I was greeted by an anonymous user who simply went by the name Oracle. Their profile was blank, but their words were anything but empty. "Welcome, Alexandria," they typed, sending a chill down my spine. I hadn't even typed my full name, and yet they knew it. "How do you know my name?" I asked, heart pounding in my chest. "We know everything," they replied. "The spirits of eyes and ears." It felt wrong, but my curiosity drove me forward. I had to see it through. I had to know if this was real. The website promised a consultation with a spirit, so I followed their instructions to start the process. The screen flickered, and the words "summon a spirit" appeared in bold letters. I hesitated for a moment, but I clicked on the link. As soon as I did, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed across the screen, and I froze. I had no idea who would be calling me at this hour, but something told me to answer, so I did. The voice on the other end was cold, almost mechanical. It sounded like it was coming from far away, from some place that wasn't quite here. "I can see you," the voice rasped. "I am inside." My heart stopped. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I pulled the phone away from my ear for a moment, my hands shaking uncontrollably. What was happening? Was this some kind of prank? I tried to hang up, but the screen wouldn't respond. The voice continued, growing louder, more insistent. "You can't escape me. I'm already in your mind, Alexandria." Suddenly, the lights in my apartment flickered. A loud crash came from the kitchen, and I spun around, my heart racing. The room was cold, freezing even. A terrible pressure filled the air, as if the very walls were closing in on me. I heard whispers, too soft to understand, but unmistakably there, filling every corner of the room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I instinctively backed away from the phone. But the voice, no, the thing, continued, louder now, more forceful. "You invited me. You summoned me." I couldn't breathe. The temperature in the room had dropped to a bone-chilling low. I could see my breath in front of me, and my vision started to blur. The walls around me seemed to bend, to pulse with a dark energy. Blood-red stains began to streak across the walls, as if the very foundations of the apartment were bleeding. It was the most horrifying thing I had ever seen, but somehow I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, caught in this nightmare that I had brought upon myself. With a sudden, terrifying force, the lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled with my phone, desperate to end the call, but it was no use. My hands felt like they were made of stone. The cold was unbearable. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, until they seemed to surround me. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the voice stopped. Silence. A thick, oppressive silence that made my skin crawl. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that something was still in the room with me, something that I had no control over. I bolted for the door, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I needed to get out to escape, but as I ran outside, I felt the weight of whatever presence had been in my apartment follow me. The air felt thicker, heavier. I stumbled down the sidewalk, my legs weak beneath me, and finally collapsed. My vision blurred as I hit the cold pavement, unable to breathe. My mind screamed for help, but no sound came. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of my phone vibrating in my pocket. I had no strength left to pull out to answer it, to try and stop what was happening. The next morning, I woke up in a daze on the cold sidewalk. My body ached, and my phone lay shattered beside me. I couldn't make sense of what had happened. I stumbled back to my apartment, my head spinning, only to find that everything was exactly as it had been before, except for one thing. On the shattered screen of my phone, there was a text message, one that I hadn't seen before. Next time, you'll join me forever. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't even process it. I felt different, hollow, empty, like something inside me had been taken. But worse than that was the feeling that the presence, the spirit, whatever it was still with me, watching, waiting. I never went back to the Fright Forum. I couldn't, but that didn't matter. The damage had already been done. The spirits were real. They were out there, and I had made contact. I had invited them in. But the real horror was yet to come. As the days went on, strange things started happening. The whispers never stopped, and neither did the cold. My apartment grew darker, the walls closing in on me. And then one night, I saw it, a figure in the corner of my room, watching me with eyes that weren't eyes at all, but empty voids, endless and cold. It's been weeks now. I don't know how much longer I have. I hear them, the whispers, the voices calling my name. I know I'll never escape. One day soon, they'll take me. I'll join the others, become part of the darkness that haunts this place, just like Alexandria Carter before me. And then, maybe, I'll be the one watching the next person who dares to summon the spirits. I had always been drawn to obscure websites, the kind that whispered secrets through a dim-lit veil of the internet. Something about the dark web intrigued me. Perhaps it was the forbidden allure of unknown knowledge, or the thrill of the risks involved. I was no stranger to the adrenaline rush of discovering hidden corners of the online world. So when I found myself browsing late one evening, I wasn't expecting anything particularly noteworthy. That was until I came across a site called Cybervale. The name itself sounded like something pulled from forgotten legend, a place that promised to be both mystical and dangerous. It claimed to be an online archive, a place where lost souls were stored, their fates sealed by some unknown force. Intrigued, I clicked the link, not fully understanding what I was walking into. The page loaded slowly, its design old and eerie, with a faded black background and text that flickered like a dying candle. The words were hauntingly simple. Access your deepest desires in exchange for a personal sacrifice. At first, I laughed it off. Some kind of weird scam or joke, I thought. But something about the phrasing, the promise of forbidden knowledge, tugged at me. What kind of sacrifice could it be? I wasn't sure if I believed in the supernatural, but I'd always been fascinated by the occult, by the idea that there were forces beyond our understanding. It was a fleeting thought, but one that stayed with me as I clicked through. The moment I did, everything changed. The air in my apartment grew cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. My laptop screen flickered, then went completely black, before flashing back on a message that made my blood run cold. The sacrifice is yours to make. Panic washed over me. I reached to close the laptop, but it wouldn't respond. The keyboard was unresponsive, the mouse cursor stuck in place. I tried shutting it down manually, pressing the power button over and over, but nothing worked. The room around me seemed to shrink, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and twist, moving with a life of their own. I felt a pressure in my chest, a weight that made it hard to breathe. The temperature had dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath in the air, even though the radiator was on full blast. I could hear a faint whisper, so faint I thought it was in my head, but it was unmistakable. The sacrifice is yours. I yanked the power cord from the laptop and tossed it across the room, but still, the screen glowed, its message unchanged. My heart hammered in my chest, but the laptop finally went dark. I backed away, my body trembling, not sure if what had just happened was real. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the whispers in my ears, cold and relentless. I didn't know what the message meant, or what kind of sacrifice was being demanded of me, but I was certain that I had just opened something I shouldn't have. That night, I dreamed of a woman. She was tall, her skin pale and stretched tight over her bones, her hair long and dark, flowing like liquid shadows. Her eyes were hollow, like pits that drained the light from everything around her. She stared at me, unmoving, and whispered, her voice raspy and desperate, "You opened the gate." I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat, my breath coming in ragged gasps. It was just a nightmare, I told myself. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling that something was wrong lingered, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. The next day, things began to get worse. It started with the mirrors. I would catch glimpses of her reflection, always in the corner of my eye, always just out of focus. I thought I was imagining things at first, but then I saw her face clearly, staring back at me, her hollow eyes filled with a dark, terrible void. The chill in the air never seemed to dissipate, no matter how high I turned the heat or how many blankets I piled on my bed. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I began to hear her voice even when I was alone. In the dark, I would hear her calling my name, her voice low and mournful, like a plea from beyond. "Sarah, Sarah." One night, as I sat in front of my computer, trying to make sense of everything, I found something that stopped me cold. I had been keeping a diary, nothing special, just a way to keep track of my thoughts, my dreams, and the weirdness that had been happening since I visited Cybervale. But when I opened the latest entry, I froze. It wasn't in my handwriting. The ink was darker, the letters sharper, and what it described made my stomach turn. The entry was a vivid, chilling recount of a woman's death, a nurse named Pearl Moen, who had been murdered in a hospital parking lot. The details were hauntingly precise. The blood, the scream, the struggle. I knew nothing about this woman. Yet the entry described her death in such detail, it was as though I had witnessed it firsthand. I couldn't explain it. The more I read, the more I realized something terrible had happened to me. Somehow, my thoughts had become tangled with this woman's past, her death, her story. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the woman, the one I had seen in my dreams, was always there, lurking just out of sight. Her presence was a constant pressure on my chest, a weight that made it hard to breathe. I was losing my grip on reality. It wasn't long before I started seeing other strange things I couldn't explain. I would hear footsteps in the hallway, only to find the apartment empty. Objects would move on their own, and when I reached for them, my hand would pass through thin air. I became paranoid, questioning my own mind. Was I going mad? But it was when I looked deeper into Pearl Moen's past that the real horror began. The more I learned about her, the more I felt like I was being pulled into her story. She had been murdered, but the details of her death, how she had died, mirrored what I was beginning to experience. I started to feel a strange compulsion, a need to replicate the violence I had seen in my visions. I tried to push it down, tried to fight the overwhelming urge, but it was like an itch beneath my skin, something I couldn't escape. I wanted to stop. I really did, but the whispers never stopped. They pushed me, coaxed me, and one night, I couldn't resist anymore. I found myself standing in front of another person, my hands trembling, my mind clouded with guilt and terror. But as I reached out, something inside me broke. I couldn't do it. I collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The next morning, I woke to the worst news of all. The police had found me. I was dead, frozen in terror, my face locked in an expression of pure, unrelenting fear. And beside me, there was a note, scribbled hastily in my own hand. The curse continues. I never meant for any of it to happen, but I had opened the gate, and now it was too late. The curse would claim another soul, just as it had claimed mine. I was nothing but a lost soul now, trapped in the endless cycle of Cybervale, unable to escape the darkness that I had unleashed. And I knew, deep down, that whoever read this story next would become a part of it too. The curse would never end.